Hi, this is video number 11 for things not working, and it concerns the fact that I've bumped into the situation where simple runs in the two programs MATLAB and iRIC give different results, even though I've tried to make all the input variables completely identical. Therefore, this video is called Basic Runs Differ in MATLAB and in iRIC. I will make this brief. It's my hope that Frank can remedy this issue fairly easily. This video is rather bare bones documentation of the problems. I've spent a couple of days trying to discover the source of the problem, and I've not been able to. Basically, as you see on the screen, I ran the Ord Ferry reach of the Sacramento River. I was trying to do something else but discovered it wasn't working, so I went backward and backward and backward to where I was running the bare bones, most simple run that had one erosion field, and I ran it for 50 years. And I made identical inputs in both iRIC and MATLAB, and the results don't match. The actual prediction after 50 years differ, and I will show you that. In order to see if it was a problem of that particular center line, today I ran the Hamilton City reach of the Sacramento River, and I did the same thing. I used a very simple erosion field, a single one, and ran it for 50 years, and again identical inputs, and again the results differed. Okay, wondering if there'd been some change in the code recently in iRIC. I went back and I ran for Ord Ferry. I tried version 20. We're now on version 25, so I went back to the old version, but it gave the same differing results. For Hamilton City, I tried to go back even farther to version 17, but that didn't solve the problem either. Note in the second case, in the Hamilton City case, and I'll show you this, that when you run iRIC, you will initially get some pretty silly results, and this is something Frank's familiar with, and he said what we need to do is change the time step from 1 year to 1/10 of a year, and that's not what we do in MATLAB, but Frank says that's what we need to do in iRIC to make it work. Anyway, I'm giving you a little heads up warning that that is something that will occur. Okay, so what I need to do first here is perhaps I'm not going to show you the actual runs, running the programs, but I want to show, at least for Hamilton City, how I have the identical inputs. Now, let's start with getting my iRIC run for Hamilton City up and running. And the way I do this is I look at calculation conditioning setting. Okay, now that's what I have for my iRIC model. I have that up and going for my MATLAB version, and here's what I do. Check curvature is enabled, 0, 6, 0, 5, 1 and 1. Okay, the time step in years, I'm going to let it be at 1, and I'll show you what happens here. That looks like it goes back to 1 no matter what you do. So the prediction time step is 1 and 1. That's identical. And we're running from 2010 to 2060. The calculate U sub f is turned off, and it's disabled here. Hydraulic don't exist here. Flow parameters. Okay. Flow parameters. Discharge 2180. Note that this is flipped around. Depth 507, 507. Width 232.32. And so you see these are the same. Grain size. It's a fixed discharge. Okay. Smoothing parameters. I just want to let you know what I'd have to go through just to make sure these are identical. 310 and 0. 310 and 0. Okay. Adjust coefficient of friction 3. Just coefficient of friction, 3. Each of these is identical. Now, this calls this erodibility grid. This is a place where there's no way to know it because we don't know what erodibility grid it's actually calling, but this is the actual grid that's used in MATLAB, and it says that it's calling it. There could be a problem here. So that's one place to investigate. Okay, cutoff parameters. This is a moot point because it's all turned off, as you see. Disabled, disabled, and there's another place where it's disabled over there. So it's not important. They're very close to each other. It's not important to have them the same. I have made them the same, and it doesn't make a difference. Okay? Whoops, I closed that. Setting, cutoff parameters. Okay, I mean I could make them the same here. Well, I'm not going to run it, so it doesn't matter. Okay. What's the next one? Bend parameters. Bend parameters. 8.005. Okay. And then the last one is just what your output location is, and this doesn't function. Okay? So they're identical. They are identical. I could do a run here. Because it runs so fast, as I always say. And you see what happens? That's what happens when you do a time step of 1, which is the time step you do in MATLAB. Okay? Now, when you do a time step of 0.1, you get a different result. Okay, I'm going to change. Yeah, I did not change my output the last time, so I wrote over that version 14 one, which is too bad. But I'm going to write over it again, and I'm just going to know that that's what it is, so I don't have to make a new one. Okay, version 14. So now you'll see we put time step to 0.1. Runs a little bit slower. That lets me know that it's 10 times the amount of time steps as the other one. Probably functioning well. Okay. And a much more reasonable output. And indeed, it's not far from the MATLAB output, but it's not the same. Okay, now I'll show you the results. Here's QGIS. Okay, there's the MATLAB output. MATLAB output itself is not perfect. It's got a little bit of funniness here. But there's the iRIC output. That's a significant difference. And it's the exact same kind of thing that happened in OrdFairy. Exact same kind of thing. When I ran it with version 17, it did exactly the same thing as it did with version 27. That's the problem I'm facing. And I'll let it go at that. Thank you very much. Just trust me that when I run OrdFairy, very similar thing happens. It doesn't have to use a time step of 0.1. You can run it at a time step of 1. But results are off in a similar way to the way these are off.